A man wants to find innovation as creating something no one could have imagined that becomes something no one could imagine living without. When asked to think of a device or convenience that most aptly matches this description, it's not uncommon to find people to say the internet or the telephone or some other 20th to 21st century invention that has shaped the modern world. However, there is a technology developed in the 14th century so significant that it has managed to integrate itself into nearly all facets of human civilization's scientific, cultural, and domestic way of life. From its original inception through its many iterations and evolutions, so much that humans barely give its omnipotence a second thought: the mechanical clock. Yes, the instrument with two hands but no arms, a face but no eyes. The machine whose incessant ticking may irk the focused worker, and the contraption whose implications may bring relief to the young and concern to the elderly. The invention and subsequent evolution of the mechanical clock has had an indelible influence on society that has allowed humans to organize, optimize, and expand our knowledge of the world as well as explore our place in it philosophically and analytically. The device's development exposed our civilization's seemingly natural proclivity towards social hierarchies while paving the way for increased productivity, resulting in some of the most culturally revered pieces of art and historic relics, and was perhaps the greatest proponent of scientific advancement during both the Renaissance and the Age of Discovery. I believe it isn't too much of a hyperbole to say that humanity would be in a far less ordered state if the mechanical clock was not so pervasive in our lives. You don't think so? Consider this. How much of your daily existence is dictated by a clock? Is it not a clock that wakes you up in the morning? A clock that tells you when to sleep? A clock that keeps you focused when you're working? Or a clock that reminds you when to eat? And while not all of these clocks may be mechanically operated, a mechanical clock was the direct predecessor to its digital iteration, while managing to instill a hyperfixation of the importance of time on society. The more in which the mechanical clock and its uses became implemented into common civilization, the factor of time became an ever looming, omniscient presence over every aspect of mundane life. Daily tasks such as sleeping, eating, working, or worshiping were now dictated by the clock. One went to bed at 10 p.m. not because they were tired, but because it was their bedtime. The popularity of the mechanical clock brought newfound organization and routine into the lives of citizens of the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, this was not always a welcome privilege, as at times this established routine would be used for oppression, as seen in Mark M. Smith's Master by the Clock, where every detail of an 1800 slave's day was dictated by their owners with the help of the temporal device. The mechanical clock and its temporal implications took root in not just the way we humans lived, but also in the way we thought creatively. The device took root in our language, in the form of idioms and common phrases like clean your clock, he punched out, a race against time, can't turn back the clock, etc. As the significant hold that the mechanical clocks took on life became more widespread, people began to synonymize the nature of time with the nature of life itself. Literary artists reflected this sentiment through poetry and prose, such as Maria Zadarinska's Clock Beat Heartbeat poem, which juxtaposes inanimate language of chimes and clock strikes with living characteristics like veins, blood, and feet. Media such as film reflected this notion, such as in the 2011 film In Time, in which humans evolved to have timers biologically linked to their life and can literally live forever until their bioengineered clocks run out. The concept of life being bounded, or at least in conjunction with time and clocks, has become a sci fi fantasy, but perhaps those writers weren't so far off. Unsurprisingly, like most technological advancements throughout history, when the mechanical clock became domesticated, meaning more accessible to the general population, it also became a status symbol, distinguishing the privileges of societal classes. Brandishing a pocket watch was an indication not only that you were wealthy enough to purchase one, but that your life was so important that you needed one to maintain the structure of your day. To a certain extent, that idea still holds to this day. Wristwatches have become far more of a fashion statement than a tool of practicality. A suit accompanied by a high end wristwatch conveys sophistication and an air of superiority. You'd imagine someone with a well crafted, expensive wristwatch as a businessman or a wealthy tycoon. What is it they say? Time is money. The mechanical clock not only influenced civilization scientifically or socially as a device, but also culturally as symbolic representation of the fluidity and rigidity of life and the awe-inspiring capabilities of human technological achievement. During the era of the artisan renaissance, time and people's fascination with it embedded itself into cultures worldwide in the form of paintings, sculptures, lifestyles, etc. The cultural exploration of the symbolic mechanical clock led to artists' interpretations of time in various ways that people of certain cultures still uphold and venerate with great fervor today. The Prague astronomical clock is a medieval clock attached to the old town hall in the capital city of the Czech Republic. The clock was first installed in 1410, making it the third oldest astronomical clock in the world and the oldest clock still in operation. In the year 2022, the artwork on the clock became the center of controversy after a local heritage group noticed the reproduction had radically changed the appearance, ages, skin tone, dress, and even genders of the appearances illustrated by its original artist in 1866. A member of the Club for Old Prague registered a complaint with the Ministry of Culture, alleging that the restoration had deviated from the spirit and detail of the original. The well known Surrealist piece by Salvador Dali introduced the image of the soft melting pocket watch. The clocks may symbolize the passing of time as one experiences it in sleep, or the persistence of time in the eyes of the dreamer. The orange clock at the bottom left of the painting is covered in ants. Dali often used ants in his paintings as a symbol of decay. The pocket watches are not the only references to time in the painting. The sand refers to the sands of time and the sands in an hourglass. The ants have hourglass shaped bodies. The shadow that looms over the scene suggests the passing of the sun overhead, and the distant ocean may suggest timelessness or eternity. From the second half of the 16th century, there was a search for a reliably accurate clock, for astronomy and for finding longitude at sea, which promoted progress in horological technology. The development of the astronomical clock was not a simple clock for telling time, but a complex instrument whose users should have basic astronomical knowledge to understand its visual indicators. Peter the Fourth's letter to Leonor drew attention to the astronomical indicators of the clock, suggesting he conceived of it as a scientific instrument rather than a mere ornament. Mechanical clocks and clock hours were occasionally used to register significant astronomical events such as eclipses. The importance of the use of the mechanical clock as a timekeeper at sea was greatly accentuated by the introduction of methods of astronomical longitude determination. This 19th century model is based on a drawing made by Galileo's friend and biographer Vivani of a pendulum clock, which Galileo designed just before his death, and which was partly constructed by his son Vincenzo in 1649. It represents the first known attempt to apply a pendulum to control the rate of a clock. Galileo had observed that the time taken for a pendulum to complete one swing was almost independent of the arc through which it swung, and he used a freely swinging pendulum to time various astronomical events. He recognized the potential of using a pendulum to control a clock, but died before his work could be completed. Toward the end of the 17th century, the importance of time and navigation information was apparent to Europe's major seafaring powers. It was in the 18th century where mariners first used mechanical sea clocks to navigate uncharted oceans with the invention of the marine chronometer in 1761. A marine chronometer is a precision timepiece that is carried on a ship and employed in determination of the ship's position by celestial navigation. It is still true today, as we find our way anywhere in the world with the incredible accurate clocks of the global positioning system known as GPS. Suffice it to say, due in large part to the mechanical clock's scientific revelations, we as a species learned how our planet moves in relation to other celestial bodies. As a civilization, we were able to join the old and new worlds together, for better or for worse. And as intellectuals, we were able to be inspired and devise more efficient modes of timekeeping, which we still practice today. With all the evidence asserting that the invention of the mechanical clock in 14th century Europe has had undeniably resonant influence on human civilization's sense of domestic life, culture, and scientific understanding, I believe it will be quite difficult to deny the device's ever looming presence throughout our history and contemporary life. I will conclude this video here as it seems I have run out of time.